Hey guys, it's Sam. I wanted to do a live stream here, just talking about the idea of, when you're playing a game like Dungeons and Dragons or whatever RPG you happen to be playing, whose game is it? Who owns that game? Is it the person who created it and you are sort of renting their creative property, right? And you're using that for your own entertainment? Or do you own it? You, the players, the people at the table, and do you have the right to make it your own and kind of make it what you want it to be? Now, I think that there's some, obviously some legal things that go into that as well. I mean, technically, the person who holds the copyright is the owner of that intellectual property, right? And so there's limitations as to what you can do with it in a monetary sense, but this was kind of prompted a little bit by Lloyd's video earlier this morning in the Absolute Tabletop community, talking about his Iscloft setting and kind of, he doesn't have anything published right now, but he's hoping to. And is this going to be something that, while it's still in his sort of headspace and on his channel and whatever, does he have any control over it? I mean, if other people wanted to play in that setting, does he have any control over it? Does he essentially own that property? And I don't know legally whether or not he does, but I suspect no, because there's not a product, right? There's an idea that's been shared, and the idea of fair use and all that, I would say no, he does not. But I think it brings up the larger point of, like I mentioned, who actually owns the game, right? Is Dungeons and Dragons, and let's just stick with that because it's the most common, right? Is Dungeons and Dragons essentially Wizards of the Coast's game, or Hasbro's game? Sorry guys, I think I dropped there for a minute. Does the game of D&D belong to Wizards of the Coast, or does it belong to the community that don't want anybody to use Dungeons and Dragons and insert guns? Now, they won't do that because they've already said in the Dungeon Master's Guide, here's a book of guns, right? But like, it's just weird to me to think about that. Who, like, can they control it? Hey, Jeff, what's up? Jeff Doty says, it's a weird subject for me. On one hand, I would be upset if someone who made a setting tried to micromanage my use of it. But the idea of taking someone's setting and intentionally ruining its theme just doesn't sit right with me. Yeah, okay, and so intentionally trying to ruin its theme, you're right, like, that sucks. And I don't know if the community would necessarily want to do that or support that. But I think if you as a player, right, take this and you're like, boy, I think this would be a lot of fun to add this element into this setting. Even if it's not something that the author of that setting would have wanted, if you and your group are having fun with it, to me, I think that that's okay. Now, certainly, if you start publishing stuff and you're making money off of it, that's a whole different thing. But for example, Lloyd, I think, did a video a couple days ago now talking about sort of generic fantasy in general and whatever, but he made a point of mentioning that, something like a Beholder would not make sense in his Iscloft setting, right? And that would be sort of an egregious thing to have in that setting because it just doesn't fit, right? And I kind of made a joke saying, we should totally run an Iscloft setting, which is very Viking themed if you're not familiar, with only Tiefling and Dragonborns and Aasimar, and they go and hunt down a Beholder, right? Now, that was tongue-in-cheek, and I actually would not want to run that game because I think that the Iscloft setting is great as it is, and I would want to play it as such. But it brings up a bigger point that in many games, you'll see right in the text of the game, they say make it your own game, right? Like this game is for you. And I always think that's interesting because to me, the creators put their game together in a certain way, right? They made the mechanics in a certain way, and if there's a setting, they placed it in that setting for a reason. Now, maybe that was because they felt like they wanted the most reach, and so therefore they wanted to have the setting that they felt would appeal to the most people so they could make the most money. Or perhaps they really felt like the setting that they put it in was the intended setting for the game, right? So, for example, Numenera. You wouldn't play Numenera outside of the Numenera setting, okay? Now, you can play Cypher System outside of the Numenera setting, and that's fine, right? But Numenera, its characters, types, and many of the foci and descriptors are all very much tailored to the setting. And so would it make sense for you to say, take the Numenera setting, take the Numenera characters, and put them on modern day Earth? Now, this is Earth, but it's a billion years in the future, so we'll see. Jeff says, let's see, I know the whole Beholder and Iskloff thing is a joke, but my phone, sorry. I'd actually be a bit upset if that happened. Maybe that makes me a stick in the mud. I can admit that much. So, I mean, I don't know. To me, I wouldn't care in the sense that people can run whatever they want to run. I mean, if you want to run a silly game and you want to just totally, rip apart a setting, such is life, right? But, I think that chances are that's going to be a one-time thing, and you're not going to maybe have as much fun with it, I think, as you could, right? I think that would not be representative of the setting, and I don't think that very many people in the community would look at that as an example of something good. I think that it would be something that the community would probably look at as a joke, right? So, I don't know that I would have a problem with it, but I'm curious to know what you guys think in terms of, let's quantify it a little bit more, right? Let's say that you have purchased your game of Dungeons and Dragons, and you now want to sort of make it your own, and you're not doing anything commercial. You want to say, okay, I want to set my D&D game in the Wild West, in a little bit more modern, maybe an 1800s setting. So I want to use revolvers and steam trains and stuff like that. And let's suppose that Wizards of the Coast came out and said, no, our game should only be played in the Forgotten Realms. Anything outside of the Forgotten Realms, that's not cool. You shouldn't do that. Now, obviously, they're not going to enforce that, but would you have issue with that? If the game designer said, look, this game is supposed to be played in a very specific way in a very specific setting. If you deviate from that, you're doing it wrong, and we don't recommend it. So, I don't know, something to think about. I would say, yeah, I would be upset with that. Now, I think it would make sense to try playing it the way they suggest to see if that is a better experience, and if it's a fun experience. But I think at the end of the day, play the game the way you and your group have the most fun playing it, okay? So if that means sticking very much to the rules and not deviating from a setting if there is one, really trying to play the game as written, great. But if you find that that's just not doing it for you, but you have some changes that make it fun, I think that's okay. If you change up the setting, if you change up the characters, whatever, that's cool. So anyway, I thought I would, do that. See if anybody has any ideas. Don't run Beholders and Iskloff. Jeff will get mad, and I suspect Lloyd will too. But anyway, you guys have a good one.